Okay, so we're looking at our completed grid. The 12-tone matrix has now been completed. This is the row that we worked on in class. It runs from the top left all the way to the top right. But on this sheet, now you can see some of the indications I'd like you to put on your own. Groupings have been found within the row, chosen not just randomly, which is one way to do it. You can choose what your ear likes. But one of the expectations in this project is that you are going to analyze your row. You're going to discover some things when you do that. And it will cease to become random and start to see ordered patterns within it, structures within it, all kinds of logic that you can then turn to create beautiful art. So part of an artist's job is finding the beautiful, seeing the beautiful, hearing the beautiful in ordinary things, and bringing that to the public, the audience. So it is kind of an introspective task, and we're not trying to make it cold and analytical. We're trying to make it alive and informed by some of the things that we find. So let's take a look at some of the indications I've got on page, and this is what I would expect when you return your row to me. And remember, this row was created randomly in class. We went around from person to person asking for notes. So it goes to show you that even with random operations, patterns emerge. It's one of those beautiful things we find in nature, you know, looking at trees and blades of grass and plants. Sure, they just are natural and they just evolved because they did. But as artists look at these things, we see structure and balance and symmetry and a sort of inner beauty that we want to highlight. And that's exactly what we're trying to do musically here. So let's take a look at this originally random, as it would seem, order of notes, and discover that there is anything but randomness to it. We have the same exact interval classes in the first two trichords. So remember that we have indicated here with the term, with the shorthand TRI for trichord, we would use HEX for hexachord, and maybe TETR or TET for tetrachord. That would be a four-note grouping. Those are terms that we've talked about, and those are things that we should be seeking. So we should be seeking, as we said before, tetrachords. There's some unique things you can do with tetrachords. Trichords, chord just being note, so review of the previous material, and hexachord. Okay, so those groupings of 4 tetra, 3 tri, and 6 hex. Okay, those come from the Greek. And so we've got these words that we can use to explain things. And you can see that I've indicated them. The POs, the prime 0 trichord matches with the I10 trichord. So let's go to I10. So here's I10, and there's the first trichord, E flat, F, E. Well, that's a nesting. Nesting is any time we have 3 or more contiguous notes. Contiguous being connected without separation. So since they appear together, the ear hears them together, and we start to identify them. And that's an opportunity. So these are all kinds of opportunities in here. I have the nestings marked in shading when they're similar. Anything that's F, E flat, E is marked as pink. Anything that's C, B flat, B, those are the other nestings I found here. Those are marked with blue. You can see that on the second hexachord, I've got a 4-note nesting. G, A, G flat, A flat. If I read this one backwards, they're in the same order, G, A, G flat, A flat. 2-note nestings are not important, but in this case, I'm marking this 2-note group because it appears in its exact order, and something else that happens later on. We're going to talk about this hexachordally combinatorial. The idea of this hexachord plus this hexachord equals the full 12-tone row, and that happens in both of these special rows. P0, the most important row, and also I5, or maybe more exactly RI5. So when P0 is read at the same time as RI5, you get all 12 notes. When this one reads 6 notes and this one reads 6 notes, you've got all 12 notes possible already taken up. So this one, first half of this, is the same as the second half of that. And the first half of this is the same as the second half of that. So the first half of RI5 is the same as the second half of P0. So another thing that we notice, other than these nestings, 4-note nesting, 3-note nesting, and then these 2 leftover notes. Doesn't count as a nesting because it's not 3 or more, but they're the only 2 notes left over. We've got nestings. And so what ends up happening is we have groupings of 3 plus 3, 2, and 4. Some of the things we're looking for are melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic ideas. So right away, breaking 12 up into 3, 3, 2, 4 might be my first device. I can see that my row is actually structured 3, 3, 2, and 4. I mean, that's a structure of my row. There's a certain relationship that's going on here where these groupings are appearing again in other rows, sometimes in the exact same order, but certainly as nestings. These 3 notes hanging out together. These 4 notes hanging out together. And the little in-between motif being the same. When I read this, the first 4 of this is the same as the last 4 of this. The next 2 is the same as the first 2 here. So if I were to hear G, A, G flat, A flat, G flat, A flat, that's one way that you could hear that structure. A lot of times what I will do with something closely ordered, a whole step and a whole step, is actually spread it. So instead of 2, express it as 10, like this. And here D and D flat, instead of just or, certainly has potential. I might do something like using octaves of D, and then again, instead of a half step, doing the wider interval of a major 7th, or 11 half steps. Instead of 1 half step, doing 11 half steps. Still same pitch class. Okay, this grouping idea, 3, 3, 2, 4. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Could right away be an expression of my row just with rhythm. If I add into this some of these motifs, F, E flat, E. It's one way of doing it melodically, harmonically, cluster, 2 half step intervals, F and E flat and E. Whole step here. When we put all 3 of them together, we get a cluster, kind of like psycho. Spreading those out wider, I might have the same idea, octaves, nice deep and dark. Again, octave Fs. And now we have, instead of F to E flat this way, we have a minor 7th, or 10 half steps up. And instead of a half step to E, a leap of 11 instead of 1. Very typical in this type of music that we hear the wider expressions. Same IC I've noted up here. We talked about this in class as well. What's unique about these is not just that they are interesting little trichords, But when we look at them, that they have the same interval class content. In other words, we go down a whole step from 12 to 10. That's a distance of 2 or a whole step downward, and then up a half step. Same thing happens here, down 2, up 1. So that tells us right away that this F, E flat E can be echoed by C, B flat B, because it's the exact same idea. Let's listen to that again. And then on C. If we wanted to go up an octave higher with that, it might sound like. That might be the best way to do that. It's your choice. So I'm going to use those elements and create a piece that highlights ideas based on these relationships because they're significant. Especially this idea that this row, our prime row, is broken up into these significant groupings, and that it has a special relationship with this retrograde inversion, the backwards inversion, G, A, G flat, A flat, G, A, G flat, A flat, D, D flat, D, D flat. And here, this relationship between these two rows with the same motifs involved, great opportunities. And also play with some of the similar but different ideas that are occurring in this version of this hexachord or this version of this hexachord, where we do have some similarity, but we've also got change. We've got new elements thrown in. Always makes things interesting in the same way that Beethoven might have done something like this. And then transposed, but slightly changed the same idea. Built a whole symphony off of that. Same thing is going on in here. You've got every transposition possible of this row. Same row being read across over and over, transposed all 12 times. Same inversion of that. To invert something, turn it upside down. So maybe if we inverted that, we might do it, say, from the 5th, and then go up a major third instead of down a major third. All kinds of things happen with inversion. As we saw it before, it's the same as a mountain reflected in a lake. And you can create all kinds of cool ideas out of that, where you're repeating the same shape, but you're turning it upside down. That's inversion. So playing around with these ideas of inverted rows, retrograde inversion, retrograde to read the same row backwards, but most importantly, these significant groupings. So I'm going to take the ones that we found, and I'm going to make something out of it. And you should look up the meaning of hexachordally combinatorial. You can find all of this information. This matrix exists in our visual music shared folder on your Google Drive, and it also is linked to from our visual music webpage for this project. You can see it here. This is an example of the completed grid. And if you have any questions on this exercise, you could always leave me some comments down here. Hey, Mr. DiTomaso, can you further explain the idea of hexachordal combinatoriality? Why is that important? And I will be happy to. The links are on the document. There are many, many things to follow on here that if you're curious and want to dig in a little deeper, you can go to 12-tone serialism, serialism past and present, and we can of course learn more about Anton Webern and his fantastic musicianship. We learned a little bit about him. You can find more about him on my page, Mr. D's top 10 or so influences page. You've got a Webern piece that we listened to in class there. And if you don't have either the shared folder or need something else from me, you can always find me here at JD Tomaso, Arlington, K-12, Mass, US. So don't forget to communicate with me if you have questions. Otherwise, just have fun. I'll see you in class.